The AppSettings.json file can be used to store a SQL Server connection string. This is part 2 of our AppSettings.json course, and we'll use this connection string in an ASP.NET Core Web API to communicate with a SQL Server database through Entity Framework. Remember to hit the red subscribe button or go to youtube.com/roundthecode to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Learn .NET, Dependency Injection and Blazor WebAssembly with Round the Code's online courses. Go to roundthecode.com/courses. The connection string can be added as part of the AppSettings.json file. To do that, we add it as part of the connection string section. We've named it AppSettings.DbContext, and it just contains our connection string to our SQL Server database. This is the database that it's referring to. It's called roundthecode_appsettings. It's got one table in there called authentication and one record of ID, client secret, and attempts. And that's all in the database for us. This is Entity Framework's DbContext, and we've named it AppSettings.DbContext. We've set a DB set of authentication. Inside authentication, it's got the properties that represent the fields in the table in the database. We've also added some settings for that authentication. So we set that the ID is a primary key, and we've mapped it to the authentication table within SQL Server. These are the NuGet packages that you need to run Entity Framework Core with SQL Server. You need the main Entity Framework Core. You also need the SQL Server and the tools package as well. We now need to add the DB context as part of the Web Application Builder instance. To do that, we call builder.services, and we can call the addDbContext method. It's expecting a generic type, so we're going to add the DB context name, which is AppSettings.DbContext. Now we need to set some options. We need to set the fact that it's using SQL Server. And within that, we need to set the connection string. We're setting the connection string as part of the AppSettings.json, so we're going to pull that into the Program.cs. So we can call builder.configuration, and there's a method in there called getConnectionString. The getConnectionString will look inside the connection strings section. Within that, we'll call the name of the connection string, which is AppSettings.DbContext. That is representing this key here. We're now going to use the DB context to read a record into an ASP.NET Core Web API. We've got our home controller. First thing we're going to do is we're going to set a private read-only member. We're going to give it a type of AppSettings.DbContext and name it as _context. Next thing is to create the constructor. Now the DB context is added as part of the IOC container for dependency injection, so we can pass that in as a parameter. And then we're just going to set the private member to the parameter that we're passing in. Next, we're going to read the record from the DB context and output it as part of the response for this index action. We're going to modify this slightly, so we're going to set it as an async method. And for that, we need to return a task with a type of authentication. We need to bring in the type for the authentication. We're going to change the response. So we're expecting a response. So we call the _context, which is the AppSettings.DbContext up here. The authentication. So we go back into the DB context. That's this DB set that is set here. And we're going to call the first async method. And we're going to get the record where the ID is 1. Running the application, we can see that it's outputting the record that we've got from the SQL Server database. In the next part of our AppSettings.json course, we'll have a look at how to set up different AppSettings.json files for different environments, such as staging and production. Check out the full course playlist at roundthecode.com/appsettings-course.